Welcome to the Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company. Fast Company called our next guest the cult brand whisperer and named her company one of the world's most innovative. Inc. called her one of the most important entrepreneurs of the decade. Now, you may not know her name, but you certainly know her work if you've bought anything from any of the past decade's hottest consumer brands. Emily Heyward is the co-founder with J.B. Osborne of Red Antler, the wildly inventive brand advisor behind category disruptors like Casper, Allbirds, Betterment, Pros, and many others. She's a seminal thinker on branding in the age of social media, and you could argue, she is the heart and soul behind the direct-to-consumer revolution. Her book, Obsessed, Building a Brand People Love from Day One, is one of the best books on branding I've ever read. Now, if you weren't already jealous of her because of her accomplishments, she's also incredibly cool and nice. So welcome, Emily Heyward.
Oh, Eric, after that intro, I think it's only downhill from here. Thank you.
Emily, we were saying, one of the book was wonderful, but there was one grace note to it, which was the acknowledgments. They were so warm and friendly, and they embraced your family in such a wonderful way. I'd like to start by asking you about your family and your upbringing. And was there something about, the way you grew up that you could trace back to the person, the leader, the innovator you are now?
I think that I was incredibly fortunate to have parents who really encouraged my creativity. There were no boundaries in terms of what type of play I should be doing, or, you need to be focusing on this or learning this. And I'm sure it helped that I was a good student, so they never really had to crack down. But I always felt like I was free to explore my passions, spend my free time the way I wanted to spend it, spend a lot of time just playing like imagination-based games versus feeling like there was some expectation that I was bettering myself. So yeah, I felt a lot of freedom, and especially creative freedom. And I think that continued as I was thinking about career choices. There was no pressure to, go to med school or law school. So yeah, I was very lucky.
So you ended up going into advertising, but after a pretty short while, you decided that, institutional advertising wasn't for you. How come?
So I learned so much in my early career in advertising, and I'm very grateful for those years. I think that where I started to become frustrated was it felt like we were being asked to solve the wrong problems. Every year my team had to come up with a new campaign that got people excited about whatever product it was, but the products hadn't changed and we could not influence their change. We sort of had to work with whatever we were given and drum up news, when a lot of times the news was very small news, if I'm being honest. And I think that this was at a time when, a sort of startup scene was just getting going around me in New York, and JB, my co-founder, and I, who had met working in advertising, we were meeting all these incredible entrepreneurs that had these ideas for how to use emerging technology to create new businesses and disrupt categories and change behavior. And it just seemed so much more exciting to us than having to yet again, roll up our sleeves and come up with a new TV campaign.
Was there one trigger, one entrepreneur who you and JB said, if we could go with this client, we could start our own business? Some trigger like that?
Scott Balsky, who was the founder of Behance. Mm-hmm. We had started just consulting with him, helping him think through. And for people who are not familiar, Behance is one of the most important networks for creative professionals. It is a place where people showcase their portfolios and connect to opportunities and so much more. And it eventually got acquired by Adobe. But when we met Scott, it was just an idea. And we were helping him think through his target audience and how to position the network and even, feature set and how it might come to life. And those conversations were so inspiring. And when we finally started pondering going off on our own, we floated it to Scott, and he really encouraged us. And most importantly, said he would hire us. And the feeling that we had one paying client was enough to take the leap. We were like, we will have something to do every day when we wake up in the morning.
Well, that's important. By the way, Scott Belsky is one of the featured speakers at the Inc. Vision Summit that's going on today. So after this LinkedIn Live, turn to the Vision Summit and see Scott Belsky
He's
as well as
an incredible speaker. So if anyone has not had the chance to hear him speak, I echo that. I highly recommend you go check it out.
I think one thing that everyone has a right to ask a branding company like yours is, how did you choose your name?
It's a very fair question. So because from the beginning, our vision was to create really the first creative services company that was designed to work with entrepreneurs. It didn't exist at the time. At the time, everybody thought entrepreneurs should not be worrying about brand. They should be focused on product, get out there, test your way to success, like make sure there's product market fit, then start to focus on things as fluffy and unimportant as brand. And our feeling was the opposite. Our hypothesis was really that brand could be a driver of business growth, and that the sooner you bake it in to how you're thinking about your company evolving and growing, the better off you'll be and the faster you'll grow. So we wanted a metaphor for growth. And to get naming inspiration, I often turn to Wikipedia. It's one of my favorite places to just get out of my head, get exposed to new words. And I somehow landed on a page that said that antlers have the fastest growing cells in the animal kingdom. So loved that image, brought it to JB. We thought antler on its own sounded a little harsh, and we modified it with red to just create more visual memorability. So there's a science fact.
That is great. And Wikipedia, source of inspiration. I love that. Tell me about the kinds of clients that Red Antler focuses on. There seems to me to be an arc of disruptive companies, usually in the consumer space, but I'm sure I don't have the whole picture. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so we actually do quite a bit of B2B as well. I think that those case studies just become less well known because people aren't necessarily in the target audience and aren't like going out and buying the stuff themselves and therefore getting excited about it. But I'd say our business is really split among different phases of business versus category. So half of our business is pre-launch. And a lot of people don't realize that we're now 14 years in and we're still 50% of our business is working with pre-launch founders. So that's, 1, 2, 3 people with an idea who are sometimes still in the process of even raising money. Like they haven't even necessarily completed that yet. And we help them over the course of, 6 to 8 months, create the entire consumer facing experience. So we're working incredibly closely with them. A lot of times they're hiring us before they hire a team. And we're really figuring out how does this come to life across sort of every stage of the journey. And then the other half of our business is later stage startups. So companies who are further along in their journey and either didn't quite get it right the first time or have reached a key juncture where they realize that their brand is not set up to take them into that next stage of growth. And then we do some work with corporate companies, but that's always quite selective. And it really is when we have the chance to do something innovative. So when corporate companies hire us, it's usually because they're looking to launch something new. We're not typically getting hired to do like a corporate identity refresh.
Right. Or the next release of Tide. I assume with those really early stage startups, you're taking equity.
Yes, most of the time. Yeah. And not in lieu of getting paid. We have a team that we need to pay. And obviously, the best case scenario with equity, you're still talking about, 5 to 7 years out if you're lucky, right? So I think that equity for us has been a really valuable tool, both for enabling us to take on opportunities who can't afford our full fee and we still want to do the work and feel like we're getting fairly compensated. And I'd say even more importantly, I think it changes the relationship dynamic. I think that when we have equity, founders realize that the recommendations we're bringing to the table are not like driven by our own motivations. I mean, I'd hope all founders would realize that working with us, but I think it becomes incredibly clear that like we are literally invested in the success of this business. We're not just trying to add another cool case study to our portfolio.
So within those ranges of kinds of companies, so early stage companies, pre-launch, and a few corporate clients that are looking to launch something new, is there a kind of constellation of attributes that you're looking for? Some founders that you would accept, whereas you might not accept all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are incredibly fortunate that we do get to turn down new business. I feel really grateful to be in that position. And I think that the main things we look for, one is chemistry, and just I think that the creative process is so messy. It's so emotional. We need to be teaming up with people that are excited to go on that journey with us. I think that, if we get bad vibes or feel like there's people who aren't going to be respectful of our team or don't share our values, like that's a big red flag, and we'll turn those down, kind of off the bat. And then it's really believing in the business idea through the lens of, does the world need this business? I'd say that's probably the simplest way to describe our thought process. I think that we're seeing like a boom of entrepreneurship, right? And a lot of people are very excited about the idea of starting a business. But because of that, a lot of people come to us with ideas that I would classify as sort of copycat or just like incremental improvements on something that's already out there. And they think they're going to be able to mimic that success. And that's not interesting to us. I think, for example, we helped launch Casper. Following Casper, there were hundreds of copycat businesses, including ones that like ripped off lines of copy that I had written, and I would see them pop up on websites. And like, we want to work with the first mover. We want to work with the people who are defining categories, not the people who are sort of trying to follow along that success.
Okay. All right, good. What you were saying about getting in the branding early, that does kind of fly in the face of, what has been the Bible for startups, the lean startup idea that you start with a minimum viable product and then modify it as it goes along, that every business plan is just a hypothesis and not really something you work on. But if you're going to have a thought through brand, you have to be a lot farther along in your journey than that. Why did you feel like it was necessary to deviate from the gospel there?
Yeah, I think that we were seeing changing forces around us that have now really played out. But even at the time, so we launched Red Antler in 2007. And I think that what was starting to occur then was that technology was no longer a competitive advantage. I think it used to be that it was true that you could have an idea that was so revolutionary and frankly hard to build that you had a built-in moat, right? Like, it would be very difficult for others to catch up. And I think that from a consumer standpoint, people were just excited that they could like do this new thing on the internet, And I think that's just no longer the case. I think the barriers for launching a new business have more or less disappeared. I think that so much of technology in most categories is open source. And I think that among that, consumers have so much more choice and so much more savviness. Like, consumers recognize good design. Like, they've got their pick of the litter and they want to align themselves with businesses that they're excited about, that they believe in, that have a great story, that make things simple for them and pleasurable and beautiful. So, I think part of it too boils down to how we define brand, right? Because it's true that out of the gate, you don't need to have some like massive, expensive media campaign. But I think that the way we think about brand is really having clarity around what your business stands for and why people should care. Like, beyond just a description of what you do, like, why should people care this business exists? How is it going to influence their lives? And then taking that idea and blowing it out across, a range of creative expressions. So ensuring that, someone shows up to your website, they get it. Like, they get what you're all about and they can figure it out quickly. And that, it welcomes them with beautiful imagery or clever copy or whatever it is. Same with a social feed, same with an email strategy, right? Just making sure that every time you're interacting with a potential, audience member or an existing consumer, that you're really bringing value and creating good feeling and making them want to come back for more. And to me, that's not something that businesses should put off.
Uh-huh. So imagine that I am coming to you as a pre-launch company, and I really want Red Antler to help me. What's the line of questioning? What's the interrogation that you put them through to see if they're the kind of company you want to work with?
Yeah, I think first it's just really understanding, how they see the opportunity for their business, like why they think it has potential and what problem they're solving for people and why it's different from anything else that's out there. We'll ask a lot of questions about competition and sort of how is this better? Like, why does the world need this? And then I think also it's important to understand the founders' backgrounds and ensure that they are the right people to be launching this business, in the sense that, these days, if someone has a good idea, guaranteed there are other teams working on something similar at the exact same time. I mean, we see it. We'll get contacted by 3 different teams doing almost the identical thing, like within a month. It's wild. So I think we, to a certain degree, want to make sure that like we're placing our bet on the right team and that we're working with people who are really going to be able to pull it off.
Can you give me an example from some of the now famous, thanks to you, companies that you worked with?
Of like simultaneous competitors launching?
No, more like the discovery process, when you realized, oh, this team really has something going.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you mentioned Pros in the intro.
Uh-huh.
And, what was really interesting to us about Pros, which for those of you who are not familiar with the business, it's a luxury custom hair care company. So, what Pros does is you take a diagnostic of about 25 different questions, everything from like where you live to your goals for your hair to like what you eat, how you exercise, how often, et cetera. And they literally make your shampoo and conditioner for you in an apothecary method. And I think to me, that's a perfect example where, it's a great idea. Someone else could have thought of that idea, but the founders came from a background of working at L'Oreal. So they really understood the category through and through, the category dynamics, what were the things that sort of needed to be in place to be successful? And then where were the places that we wanted to break the rules and do things differently and stand out from a brand that might be launched by, one of the big players in the space. So, it doesn't need to be that founders have like direct experience in the category in which they're launching. But I do think with categories like beauty, hair care that are so crowded, so competitive, it really helps to have been on the inside and sort of almost know your enemy, and then be able to innovate from there versus just being someone who like is really into hair care and decides to start this business one day.
There is one sequence of questions that you describe in the book that reminded me of something that someone earlier on The Human Factor talked about as the kind of analysis that he encourages his clients to do. I forgot what you called it, but it's sort of a sequence of asking why, almost
my why test.
A child, the why test. And it's just digging deeper. Tell us how that works and where it leads you.
So that's actually a tool we tend more to use internally when we're writing a brand strategy. So one of the first questions we ask our new clients is, what's the problem that you're solving for people? And 99 times out of 100, it actually just happened yesterday. I was like, I should write this down because it's a great example of this. And I, of course, didn't. 99 times out of 100, the entrepreneur answers with their business idea. So I'll give you an example. We'll say, what's the problem you're solving? They'll say, a more convenient way to buy dog food. Or what's the problem you're solving? More data visibility for small business owners. Those are benefits. Those are not problems. Like, those are businesses. And, it's so funny to me because they don't realize they're doing it. And I don't blame them for doing it, but like they're jumping ahead to the answer. So what our job is to make sure that we're really going deep on our target audience and understanding like what is a problem they're facing regardless of whether or not this business existed. Like, it can't be self-serving. It can't be that the problem is that they wish this business existed, because that's not true, right? So the way we make sure that we're really going deeper is I have this construct called the why test, where let's say with the more convenient way to the buy dog food one, you'll say, okay, well, why do they want a more convenient way? Well, they love their dog and they want to make sure that, when their dog's hungry, the food is there, right? And then you have to keep asking, like, why does that matter? Why does that matter? To get deeper and deeper until you really uncover a human truth, like an emotional driver, something that sort of sits beneath the mundane, sits beneath the surface and speaks to who they are as a human being at the sort of deepest level. And my little joke is that you're only allowed to stop when you get to fear of death, because ultimately everything that motivates us as a human is our sense of our own mortality. Like, it's basically like at the end of the day, the reason we do anything we do is because we know we're going to die one day and we've got to make the most of our time here. But we don't write all our strategies about fear of death. It's just, that's sort of like, once you get there, you're done, and then you can go back.
Well, Emily, can you give me an example? One of your clients, maybe Keeps.
Yeah, totally. So, Keeps is a men's hair loss company, men's hair loss prevention company, obviously, that connects men to, a series of medications that can help prevent hair loss. And we did consumer research thinking that the reason why men were not engaging with these products was because of embarrassment and stigma. And that was true to a certain degree. There was definitely a sense of like, the existing products don't really speak to me. But it was actually more a sense of inertia. So men feeling, we heard from a lot of men like, yeah, I know I'm going bald. Like, I'll deal with it when it's really a problem. Like, I don't go to the doctor unless like my arm is falling off, or like, I don't ask for directions unless I'm like literally driving into a lake. So like this baldness thing, it's something I can put off until I actually need to take action. And the problem with that line of thinking is you actually cannot grow hair back. You can only prevent its loss. So it's too late once you've lost it all. So if the problem was, men feel a sense of vulnerability, sort of asking for help, if we really think about what we're hearing, it's like, okay, well, why does that matter? Because, they don't want to admit a problem. They don't want to admit weakness. They don't want to admit insecurity. It's like, well, why does that matter? Because men feel they need to, and I'm generalizing, but, go through life emphasizing sort of strength and confidence and self-assuredness. And it's like, well, why does that matter? Because we're getting older and weaker and, one day we die.
Another characteristic, counterintuitive, that I found in the book and the Red Antler approach is focus on a singular product. And we've seen competitors like Casper or Away enter into markets and disrupt markets where the incumbents had many, many different models. And Casper comes in with just one mattress. But you applaud that kind of focus. How come?
I think that it can be an incredible advantage for a new company that's very, very hard for an established company to pull off. I think that a lot of traditional companies, particularly those who sell through traditional retail, have grown by launching new stuff. If you go to the drugstore, you're going to see a wall of toothpaste, all from the same brand, that has like the most minute differences. It's like, I don't know if I want tartar control or whitening. Both those things sound important from a toothpaste. Like, why can't I have both? And you're sort of like stuck in this paralysis at that moment. And I think that what these newer companies, especially the direct-to-consumer ones, are able to do is like take that work out of the equation. You're not forced to weed through a bunch of different products where truthfully the differences are not relevant. Like they're just there in service of the company, not in service of the consumer, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And instead you're just told a story, Away, which is not a client of mine, but it's a brand I really admire. When they launched, they had one suitcase. Now they have a bunch, but they've been able to get there over time. And at launch, it enabled them to not have to spend a lot of time in the weeds around, oh, this suitcase versus that suitcase, and this is right for you, and that's right for you. And instead, they just told a story about travel. It was so aspirational. It almost wasn't about the product. And then the other advantage is that suitcase was iconic. You'd see it in the airport back when we went to airports and you'd recognize it. So, I know that worked fantastically well for Allbirds in the beginning when they had just one style, and you'd see it everywhere. It became ubiquitous, for better or worse. I think that when I bring up focus, the pushback I often get from more established companies is like, yeah, well, that's all well and good when you're first starting, but like we're already well into it and we have a bunch of different, styles or SKUs or features if we're talking about software. And my pushback to them is that doesn't mean you can't drive hierarchy. You can still make it easier for people to understand like what's most important. It doesn't need to be that you show up to the site and like everything's thrown in your face at once. Let them discover it in a more controlled and sort of usable way, but make the hard choices. I mean, Eric, you can relate to this. It's like you've got to edit yourself.
Right.
Which is hard to do.
It is hard to do. No, that is the saying among journalists is that the art of editing is killing your loved ones. All of your favorite words, all your favorite sentences, they have to come out to get to the heart of the story. You at Red Antler have a particularly advantageous window on things that are coming next. You have people parading in who want your services, who are solving problems and approaching them in a novel way. So spin the future for us right here. What do you see as the next big problems that are ripe for being solved?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anything here will be shocking to anyone, but I think that, we're definitely going to be seeing a lot of businesses that are trying to figure out how we manage like a hybrid workforce. Because I think that, we've all seen obviously like the birth of Zoom and other tools like it. But as a business owner looking ahead, I'm much more nervous for the scenario when like half the people are in the office and half the people aren't, than like everyone's just on Zoom and you know where to find them. So we actually just helped a company relaunch, really. It was more of a brand evolution called Owl Labs. That's an incredible hardware and software solution where they have a device that can sit in the center of a conference room table. And it actually it's a little owl. It's very cute. And it sort of responds to whoever's speaking. So for someone who's not there, it gives you a sense of being in the room in this very dynamic, seamless way. So, for me, there's definitely going to be more businesses like that are really thinking about, the future of work and how it's not going to be fully remote. But we're going to have to accommodate a level of flexibility that a lot of business owners just refused to consider before this. So that's one. And then I think, no brainer here, but healthcare, is just going to continue to be massive. And I think especially, when we were all like suddenly made so aware of how vulnerable we are and how much the existing healthcare system really wasn't serving us. We're seeing a lot of innovation there. And I think we're also seeing a lot of businesses in what would be called like the aging in place space. So really thinking about, the aging population in the US and the fact that, baby boomers in particular really do value their independence, are probably less likely to want to go into an assisted living scenario. So how do we create tools, software, hardware, and beyond services that help people sort of stay in their homes, but in a much safer and more, sort of thriving way. So those are just three that are on my radar.
Those are good. I'm definitely in the market for that hybrid workplace solution. That is going to be that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about leadership. I mean, every company that becomes successful, and Red Antler is like definitely included in that. The founders have to go through this evolution where they stop being the creative genius or the great coder or the great salesperson or whatever it is, the product designer, and be the boss. You have 110 employees or so, all of whom are capable. How did you make the transition? What's it look like for you? And how did you make that transition to step back a bit and be the boss?
It was really hard. And I'm sure there are people on my team who probably think I need to continue with that transition. But I'd say that for me, it really was about shifting where I get a sense of like personal fulfillment and pride. And that used to come from my own creative output. Like my highest sense of fulfillment came from writing something and being like, oh yeah, like I nailed it, or, sort of coming up with a name for a brand that just felt to me like this is the name, right? And I think now my proudest moments, the moments that are the most rewarding for me, are related to our team. What wonderful people they are and also how brilliant they are, and that was something that I needed to work on. Like it was like a transference of pride in a way where, feeling like when someone brings me an amazing idea, that's more exciting to me than if I came up with it myself.
Good for you. That's a crucial transition. And as you said, not easy, but great when you do it. And all the great leaders do it. Who are your heroes?
Well, I would say I was really fortunate early in my career to have back-to-back two incredible women bosses. First was a woman named Jill, and the second was a woman named Sarah, each of my first jobs. And they both were incredible about making sure that I was given opportunity. I never felt like I was just there to, make them look good or, get them coffee or whatever. I don't know if that still goes on in the workplace, but I felt like I was really given opportunity from the beginning. And it was so helpful for me to have role models like that from the start that really gave me a model of the kind of boss that I wanted to be. That I felt I built a really lasting, lifelong friendship with as well. And that I was able to go to as a whole person and not just as an employee. So I think that was incredibly influential for me and probably more directly, influencing how my life evolved than some, celebrity or person that I've never met.
Wow. That's great. Well, here's to them. That's amazing. Most entrepreneurial companies don't succeed. We know that. Truth is all too painfully obvious to us at Inc. and Fast Company. Red Antler is not one of those companies. You're a huge success, deservedly so. When you look back at the course of your career and the growth of the company, what do you attribute it to? How would you answer the question, why you?
Well, I think that from the start, we had an idea that was differentiated and at the time faced a lot of skepticism. I mentioned it earlier, but, even from our parents who were incredibly supportive, but they're like, wait, why are you choosing startups? They don't have money. What? That's so weird. And I think a lot of people who sort of just listened to our business idea assumed that we were starting with startups in order to work our way up to working with the brands that you've all heard of, and that just wasn't true. This is what we were passionate about, and we've stayed passionate about it. I still care the most about that work. That is why I get up every day in the morning. So I think that's one, is just having something that we were incredibly deliberate about and passionate about, and we stuck with it. And I also think that we absolutely go above and beyond to make sure that we are setting up our clients for success. And that doesn't mean that they are always happy with us. I think a lot of times we're pushing back more than they would like. We're not the easiest. We're not just sure, you want it to be blue, we'll make it blue. We're going to have the hard conversations because we see ourselves as ultimately on the hook for helping drive their business growth. And so because of that, we have a lot of very successful and happy clients who then talk about us to other entrepreneurs. And we've really grown through word of mouth only. That's it.
That's good. All right. So let's leave it there. So here's to staying passionate, word of mouth, and to fresh ideas. And for those who help those people with fresh ideas, brand those ideas. Emily Heyward, thank you for being on The Human Factor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
This has been The Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg. Thanks for watching.